Bengals, Dolphins. Going through what y'all need to know to make some money on this bitch. All right, so first thing, let's get to the picks real quick. We got a spread of 11.5. Dolphins being favored. Over under set at 42.5. Um, so first thing, I would say the money line is safe in this game on the Dolphins. Whatever parlay you want to throw that into or whatever, the Dolphins are going to win this game. In terms of the spread, though, I think it's bettable, but neither of them are like my favorite. I would be on the side of Dolphins minus 11.5 and the under of 42.5, but both of those are fairly fragile. I'd say if some dumb thing happens, kick return touchdown, multiple pick sixes, then both of those are going to be in jeopardy. So be careful, but I think they are both reasonably bettable. But yeah, so those are my picks here, and stick around, and I'll show you the why and how of how it goes down. So first thing, we got the Bengals offense versus the Dolphins defense. In terms of injuries, nothing relevant on the Bengals that I care about, and also not on the Dolphins. Nice this late in the season, ain't really dealing with injuries like that no more. For them, nice for them. That ain't normal. So we got the first step. We got the offensive line versus the defensive line in terms of run blocking. So the offensive line looks like the Bengals kind of settled with what they're going with next week. I think it's going to be going forward left to right. Jonah Williams, Quentin Spain, Trey Hopkins, Alex Redmond, Bobby Art, I would assume is what they're going to go with going forward. Maybe Xavier Su'a-Filo just came back off IR. They rotate him into, but that's what I'm going to operate with. So on the interior, listen, the Bengals are still bad. Quinn Spain, I respect a little bit. I think he's okay, and Alex Redmond even isn't a disaster, but neither of them are like needle movers. And the Dolphins front, they're not. I ain't gonna call them nasty. That ain't the right word for it. But they're strong, right? And they play in a good scheme. They're coached well. They know what they're doing between Raekwon Davis since he's started and Christian Wilkins. They're both decent run defenders. Again, neither of them really anything special, but here they're more than enough to think to hold the point of attack on the interior. And then on the edges, I mean, listen again. I talked about it in my last Bengals video. I'm gonna talk about it again here. The tackles for the Bengals suck, both of them. Obviously, Bobby Hart is out there, but Jonah Williams too. He's bad. He's been bad every. I don't say every snap he's played. That's not true. Every game he's played, he's been bad. This year, and he's going to continue here. When you talk about run blocking, he's just not a notable pusher, right? And the Dolphins' edges, I mean, they're good, like good, legitimately in run defense. Shaq Lawson, one of the best run defending edges in the league, and Andrew Van Ginkel, Kyle Van Noy, whoever plays the other edge, both of them have shown to be at the very least reasonable. So I wouldn't expect. I mean, from any, there's just no source of push on this line. Like I said, outside of a tiny bit from Quinn Spain, they're really going to have issues at the line of scrimmage constantly. So then you got to the second level. Now the Dolphins linebackers, they're all right. Landon Roberts is an okay box player, and Jerome Baker, he's fine. In this kind of good defense where he gets to fly around and do his stuff, he looks decent. I'm not gonna get super high on him. He still has some issues. He's just not a huge playmaker, but he's all right. Um, but anyway, the thing here is that both of them are going to be really free to clean up anything. Not that there's going to be a lot to clean up because nothing on the Bengals is really affecting them. Because you talk about the two ways, right? It's just moving the line of scrimmage, and their scheme doesn't really push that as what they're supposed to be doing, or like moving from blocking at the line up to the second level, and they just can't do that here. So you're really looking at free linebackers for the vast majority of the game. So the overall run game, it's just going to be awful again for the Bengals. They can't run the ball, and there's really good reason for it. They just don't do anything that lets them run the ball, right? I mean, they hand it off, but after that, everything's bad. Their whole line can't run block well. They don't get to the second level. Their scheme doesn't create mismatches or lanes in any meaningful way. Their running backs don't create. It's just bad, and it's going to be bad here. So then you talk about the edge rush is next. We'll get into pass game stuff. So the Dolphins are kind of a unique team to talk about in terms of pass rush because none of their individual rushers are particularly notable. Maybe I guess I should say Emmanuel Agba is actually I think he's maybe better than reasonable. He's underrated. He's pretty good, and Zach Seiler too has shown like like actually good things fairly consistently on the year. So I'm not going to write him off at all either. But neither of them are great. But they do a ton of confusion line of scrimmage. Right? It's the Patriots defense from forever. But it's coached well, and they do a lot of stuff that creates pressure when they don't necessarily need to beat somebody one on one. But here they also can do that, especially because of how bad the tackles are, right? So between Shaq Lawson, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Emmanuel Ogba on the edges, they're going to be fairly consistent pass rush. And on the interior, I mean, the Dolphins' interior rushers are bad outside of Seiler. And actually, here I've kind of underrated or overrated how bad the Bengals' interior offensive line is at pass blocking before, especially now that Michael Jordan is out of there. But they're still not good, right? And Seiler can get some, and maybe they move Ogba inside a little bit or something like that. Raekwon Davis, Christian Wilkins, not pass rushers at all. So then you talk about the receivers. So here, I mean, the Bengals are gonna be bad again. This is another just real mismatch, offense versus defense. I mean, so AJ Green at this point, right? He just can't separate from anybody really. To win, he requires just playing against either bad corners or small corners, neither of which are the case here. Xavier Howard is legitimately really good, and Byron Jones actually I think is absolutely overrated. I mean, you'll see him versus good receivers get beat consistently. Not he's not awful, but he's not playing good receivers here. I do like T Higgins, and I think he's a reasonable player, but still not on the level where he's going to consistently create separation against Byron Jones. And Xavier Howard, whoever, like I said, whoever he follows, I actually think he's going to follow T Higgins. I'm sure the Dolphins are smart enough to do that. He is so much better than him at this point that T Higgins is going to really, really struggle to create separation. And AJ Green too. And then Tyler Boyd also, I kind of harp on this a little bit. So Tyler Boyd is like just the most classically schemed open receiver, right? Like he has super strong hands in traffic. No, I ain't gonna take that away from him at all. He's really good at that, and I'm not gonna say he's a bad route runner for sure because he's not. But he is if he plays good slot corners, you see that he just doesn't consistently create separation at any meaningful level. He's not awful. He's not even close to awful. He's not even bad, but he's just okay. And here, just okay is not good enough. Nick Needham, the Dolphins' primary slot corner, is a good player, and he's actually the exact type of. Because I'd be more worried, right, if they had like a smaller, little 5'7" slot guy or whatever. But Nick Needham's a bigger dude, and he can still stick with especially an athlete the caliber of Tyler Boyd. So I'd be worried about even Tyler Boyd being consistently open in this game, despite how he's schemed. So then you talk about the quarterback, the next step. Brandon Allen. So I talked about it in my video on them, but just in case, picture whatever random like undrafted or seventh round pick backup quarterback from a running scheme like a run and shoot offense or spread offense in college, Big 12, and throw him into an NFL game. That's what you get with Brandon on all the stereotypes of just not being able to read defenses, moving, getting nervous at the first sign of pressure, all that stuff. He does it really, really, really obviously. And that's going to be really bad here. I mean, the Dolphins run this complicated, really, really unique scheme. I guess it's not unique as the Patriots or whatever, but in terms of how it is in relation to all the other ways teams run defenses, is pretty unique. And they have their own twists on it too. But he's gonna be bad. He's not gonna be able to. He's just not gonna understand what they're doing. Although, just interesting, I will note that could create some positives for him because he's just not even gonna try. I would suspect he's gonna look at something for whatever a second and be like, fuck this. I don't know what's happening, so I'm gonna start scrambling around, wait for somebody to get open, which is probably for his benefit here because if he tries to actually sit in the pocket, he's just gonna throw a bunch of picks or get sacked or whatever. So actually I'm gonna not go overboard with how much the scheme is alluding to him because I really think that's what's gonna happen is he's just gonna start, saying fuck it and trying to run around. Although you'll see, even if he does that, his receivers aren't going to get open even over time enough to make that a useful strategy. But yeah, no, and despite doing that, he's still going to be dangerous in terms of getting sacked, fumbled, throwing picks. It's not going to look pretty. So yeah, the overall pass game is going to be awful. Like again, just look at it. What drives success on their offense, right? Because generally the answer, I guess, is Tyler Boyd. But here, he's just not. He's not going to be good enough to do it. I promise you. And T Higgins, while again I have respect for, Xavier Howard's just a lot better than him at this point. And if they, they can't run the ball, so play action is not really an option. It's not like they're going to have a ton of quick scheme stuff that works against this good, disciplined Dolphins defense. So, and then if they do manage to get to the red zone, I mean, again, it's the same thing. How do they get touchdowns, right? It's effectively relying on AJ Green or T Higgins jump balls, which, hey, that's not impossible in this game. But I mean, you're never counting on that. So I put their point spread at 0-7. I think it's legitimately possible they get shut out. Last week they got to whatever, so 17 against the Giants, right? 17-19 it was. But that was because of a kick return touchdown, field goal off of like a turnover in the Giants' end, and then a last second drive that was because of two pretty bad penalty calls. There's nothing. There's just nothing encouraging, and the Dolphins' defense is better um, than the Giants for sure. So yeah, I think there's a legitimate chance they get shut out in this game. So I would put it 0-7 in terms of the point spread. So then you talk about the Dolphins' offense versus the Bengals' defense. This is a similarly not great picture. Now it's better than that, but injuries first on the Dolphins' offense. Looks like Solomon Kinley still might not play. I'm not sure even if he did, he would start at this point. Also, Jakeem Grant, I'm not quite sure if he's going to play this point, which actually is an important one, but to bury the lead here, but Tua, right? So we don't know who's going to be starting at quarterback. They said they're going to make basically a game time decision about that. But I'm just going to fairway. I don't really care, to be honest with you, in this matchup. And other ones I definitely do. But in this, the way they're going to be executing offense, I don't know that there's a meaningful difference. Because Tua is not very good at this point, and whatever, fight me about it. But you can see the reason, the only times he scored points is when he's benefited from multiple turnovers, like in the red zone of the other team. There's a reason, I picked the Broncos over them and things like that. But not to get too much into that, like I said, in this matchup, because if he played, he'd be fine. But I'm going to operate as if it's Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I'll circle back around to it if it's Tua. On the Bengals defense, Christian Covington might not play. Big deal. Christian Covington is absolutely the best player on the defensive line. But that's the only relevant one. So on the interior, or on the offensive line, push. I mean, it's gonna be okay, right? So you have Eric Flowers, Ted Karras, and like I said, I'm gonna operate as if it's Jesse Davis at guard and then Robert Hunt. Um, there's not gonna be a ton there, but it's not gonna be a disaster because without Christian Covington on the Bengals, then you talk about Mike Daniels, Geno Atkins, Xavier Williams, none of whom are real run limiters. Geno Atkins just an older like marginal pass rusher at this point. Mike Daniels, kind of same thing. He's bigger, so he's just a little bit better run defense. But neither of them are great. And Xavier Williams is just a really just a classic big nose tackle who doesn't penetrate at all. So it's kind of a neutral situation, which in general favors the offense, and here definitely does because there's not going to be like penetration. If Christian Covington plays, then I'm going to amend that a little bit. That it's going to be a little bit better for the Bengals, like for sure. But I don't want to overrate his impact. He's not like incredible. He's not a whatever top tier defensive tackle. So then on the edges, Sam Hubbard, one edge on the Bengals. He's legitimately good as an edge defending run player, run defending edge player, but nothing crazy. And on the other end, Carl Lawson, if he plays, he's not a great run defender, but I've talked about this before. He can make some plays in the backfield, similar to Brian Burns is the way I look at him as a run defender. And then they actually started playing Marcus Hunt last week, which I can't understand why the Saints let go Marcus Hunt. He was legitimately good. I don't know what happened there, and he was pretty good last week too for them. And if he's playing, he's actually kind of a limiting option as far as run defense goes. So yeah, I don't think there's gonna be much edge push. Robert Hunt's a monster. Don't get me wrong, that dude's fucking huge. And if he's matched up with like Carl Lawson, somehow gets like a 1-on-1 or something, and he's down blocking, then he'll fuck him up, no doubt. But that's not gonna be something that consistently happens. And the other edge, Austin Jackson, who I actually like. Especially like as a rookie, I think he's pretty good given the time he's missed with injury too. But he's not like a run blocker, really a great one, and I think he would struggle with Sam Hubbard or Marcus Hunt. So overall, there's some flashes on the offensive line of push, but it's nothing driving really. So you talk about the linebackers, Bengals linebackers, mediocre best. Josh Bynes, okay inside player. Jermaine Pratt, okay inside player. Especially if he's not facing a ton of rushing attempts. And the other spot they've I think, officially given it to Logan Wilson now over Akeem Davis Gaither. And Logan Wilson's bad, has been this year. I mean, he notably gets exploited in run defense. You know, he is just a rookie, and he wasn't playing at the beginning of the year, so maybe he'll be better. But for now, I mean, he's not a positive on defense. So, but I don't think they're disasters, especially Josh Bynes and Jermaine Pratt versus the Dolphins' run scheme is not really good. So in terms of second level impact, I think there's going to be like little flashes from them comboing from the line of scrimmage, especially on the interior, but nothing real notable. So I think they're going to be mostly free to make plays. And I'm going to mention Von Bell and Mackenzie Alexander too, strong safety slot corner, both good run players too, and they're going to be notably helpful in this game. So yeah, the overall run game. I mean, so if they get a bunch of attempts, which given what I said about the Bengals offense, I think they're going to. There's probably going to be some flashes, just because the linebackers from the Bengals are not great. It's not like anything about their D line is really dominant, but I mean, the Dolphins run scheme not great again, and I'm just they've struggled to create chunks most of the year. Now, if it's Matt Breida, if he gets a bunch of carries, there's a chance there's a long touchdown because I hope goddamn fast that dude is, but not something I would bet on. So you talk about the pass rush. Carl Lawson is going to be probably pretty good as a pass rusher in this game. I mean, he is again he's not great, but he's good enough to beat especially the rookie Robert Hunt on the one tackle, and even Austin Jackson. I actually like it pass pro, especially so far this year, but he's not far. You know, he's really far from perfect at this point. Carl Lawson's good enough to get him, and even Sam Hubbard, maybe a little flash, although he's not a real notable pass rusher in of himself. And then on the interior, I mean, I don't really see it. The Dolphins' interior line is pass blockers, especially their guards, aren't great, but I don't know that old Geno Atkins and even older Mike Daniels are the ones to take. In fact, I know they're not the ones to take advantage of that. So again, if Chris Covington plays maybe a little flashes, I'm telling you that guy's good, but not much. But there is edge rush, which is the much more important of the two. So then you talk about the quarterbacks. So with the quarterbacks, I mean, if it's Fitz, right, I think he'll be okay. The Bengals don't do anything like complicated on defense. They're just pretty good. I tell you what, I skipped the receivers. So I'll go back to this. So the receivers, it's not looking good for the Dolphins. I mean, so there's a reason that the Dolphins only scored 20 last week versus the Jets, and you're running into kind of that, but even a better version of it, because the corners of the Bengals are good and are the type of players who limit the Dolphins receivers. Devontae Parker doesn't separate great against a player like William Jackson. I think he's gonna be okay because his weakness is more with like smaller players. Actually, interestingly, I think like AJ Boye from a couple years ago, but he's not gonna be great against William Jackson. And then the other edge, dude, I mean, LaShawn Sims he will rock Mac Hollins. Mac Hollins played a lot last week. Um, and then even in the slot, I like Jakeem Grant actually, even as a receiver. I think he's like they should use him more. But he might not even play in this game, and even if he does, Mackenzie Alexander, like legitimately good slot corner. I'm not convinced he's just and Jakeem Grant's just not a consistent driver of offense. And then they've been playing Lynn Bowden, Malcolm Perry kind of interchangeably as their other like slot weapon guy. Neither of whom I think could separate down the field versus any given Bengals secondary player, but I think they also could between those two and Jakeem Grant like create some yards after catch or with like screens that type of stuff. So yeah, back to the quarterback. Again, I'm gonna go with Fitz first. So Fitzpatrick, he has this reputation as like the YOLO ball thrower. So far this year in the Dolphins, that hasn't really been the case when he's played. He's actually been much more of like a system quarterback and just taking what's there. Although he will default into throwing the yo-yo YOLO balls at times. And here I actually think that might be the case because there's not going to be a lot of easy options for the Dolphins passing game here. I mean, outside of, like I said, a little bit of Jakeem Grant and some scheme stuff, and Devontae Parker is not a disaster. There's just not very much. As you mentioned, Mike Gesicki, really, really bad separator. Like, not even just okay, like he's bad at separating from any reasonable player. And whether it's Von Bell or Mackenzie Alexander, or even Jesse Bates if he gets down in the box to guard him. All three of them are way better than him, so he's going to struggle to separate as well. So yeah, Fitz, like I said, I mean he's just kind of a self limiter. His ceiling's not super high unless whatever he's playing in the Bruce Arians Bucks offense, um, and you'll see that in this game. Um, and if it's Tua, again, Tua has not been good this year. And if he's playing, I'd be legitimately worried about how many points the Dolphins will score. If it's Fitz, they're going to be fine. They're going to figure it out. But with Tua, man, he's been rough. He has shown some nice things, though. I actually definitely see a path for him to be pretty good going forward. But as of now, it's not been anything impressive. So hopefully, for their sake, actually Fitz plays. But either way, again, because when I talk about the Bengals offense, I don't really think it matters much. So yeah, the overall pass game again, it's kind of mediocre. Not a lot of drivers, not a lot of separation, but not nothing. And the pass rush isn't killer, so you kind of a tie goes to the offense situation, but not by very much. So then once you get into the red zone, this is what I think keeps the score down. Because even if I do think the Dolphins do end up moving the ball because they get so many chances reasonably well, once they get in the red zone, they're not going to score that much in terms of touchdowns because their rushing isn't going to be dominant here. The Bengals defense again is pretty good, and Devontae Parker is like an okay jump ball guy. He's actually more of a like downfield guy as opposed to like fade in the end zone. But yeah, there's nothing that indicates to me they would score consistently in the red zone. But I don't think they're going to be a disaster. So as overall, I get them at 16 to 24 points. That could be higher a little bit given how many turnovers they get off the Bengals, and I think that's what the spreads come down to, right? Because I'm pretty much guaranteed the Dolphins are going to win, but the minus 11 and a half, I don't know if they're going to score enough to cover that. You know, if it's 7 to 16, which is entirely possible, right? So I think it just kind of depends on if they get one pick six or whatever pick brought back to the 2 yard line or three. But actually, no, I'm kind of talking myself more into the under because either way, if the Bengals only score in the single digits, the Dolphins are not going to make up their remainder to get to 42 and a half. So I think under is actually the better of the two plays here, but neither of them are guarantees because it is also possible the Bengals do what they did last week, where they get into the teens, at which point I'd be a little bit more worried about that for sure. So yeah, I would say under 42 and a half, you're all right, but not crazy. Then Miami minus 11 and a half, and that's Dolphins Bengals.